Comes summer, and the big thirst is here. The city goes dry. Heat travels in angry waves to the municipal authorities. Seminars on basic rights are held, and social activists come into their element. Water and water-related problems make screaming headlines in daily newspapers. And yet the solution, though simple enough, eludes us. But wait, solutions come later. What, you may want to ask in the first place, is water doing in a series of films about building technologies?
Well, the next time you feel like asking this question, just try a simple test. Go to the most beautiful building in your neighborhood and try staying there for, say, about 48 hours without any water to drink. And then try and write an essay on the beauty of the building.
Our constitution as an instrument of social change can really be used effectively by consumer activists and citizens.
Whatever we may do at present will at best be a firefighting operation.
Presently, we are reaching water to them through tube wells, by neighborhood piped infrastructure, or where it is extremely difficult, there even the water tankers are being sent to these far-flung areas to ensure that water supply is adequately made available to them.
When we talk about water problems, we are actually talking about two seemingly unrelated issues: poor water supply on the one hand and water pollution on the other. But if you take a closer look, you will realize that the solution to the problem is to recognize the relationship between water supply and water pollution. This relationship becomes clear if we look at it at the level of the individual plot itself, the building. Compare, if you will, the building with the working of the human heart. Sounds far-fetched? Well, not if you look at it like this. The fact is that a building is much more than just a shell. Like the human body, it is as much a network of organic systems as it is a structure. In this complex network, water supply is to the building what the blood vessels are to the human body, the lifeline. The heart pumps out blood, which is supplied to all the vital organs, which during the course of its use picks up toxins that are dangerous to the body. Is this impure blood then discarded by the body? Not at all. It is the toxins which are discarded by the filtration process through the kidneys, leaving the now pure blood to return to the heart, ready for use once again. In much the same way, there is a definite relationship between water supply and water pollution, and neither can be studied nor sorted out in isolation. So where does the correction process begin? Well, if we were to just stop and think for a moment, the solution would be clear enough, both simple and commonsensical really, if only we were to relate present problems to traditional wisdom. 4 key issues emerge. Planning strategies that are required at the initial stage itself. Traditional versus present methods of the disposal of kitchen and bath waste. The logic of the 12-liter cistern in our WCs. And the rationale of the vast paved, non-absorptive areas. Today we push our problems under the carpet by simply attributing this mess to overpopulation. But if one were to really look at it, one would realize that although our ancient kingdoms may have been small by today's scale, their typical densities were comparable to those of any modern city.
If water issues are to be properly handled, they'll have to be taken care of at the planning stage itself. The natural water courses or nalas are generally left as incidental open spaces and all the garbage is thrown on them. Slums come up near them and the whole system gets destroyed. At the planning stage, the natural water courses should be conserved as city-level open spaces and made the most beautiful part of the city. Only then a rational water system can emerge.
Our ancient cities were generally built on high land at a certain distance from the basin. This meant carrying the water up to the settlement by hand or with the help of draft animals. The advantages were overwhelming. The wastewater would travel along the slope, shedding its impurities along the way and getting continuously absorbed, so that by the time the water reached the basin, it was pure again, leaving the recharge of the water in the basin both clean and complete. Today, under the misnomer of economical planning, we build in the basin itself. That is what we mean by the need for planning strategies being required at the initial stages itself. Simple enough to tackle if you look at it as our forefathers did. From broad planning strategies, now to planning of the smaller details at the level of the individual plot. Here too, we need to take a helpful pointer from tradition. The fountains mingle with the river, and the river with the ocean. The winds of heaven mix forever with a sweet emotion. When the poet Shelley wrote these lines, he was obviously unaware of the ground realities of urban life. Today, what really mixes with the river is mostly sewage, fecal matter, bacteria, detergents, filth, totally lethal. From all human settlements, the kitchen, bath and toilet waste all make their way into our rivers, with the existing centralized sewage treatment plants being unable to take the load. By the time it gets to the river, we are talking about millions of liters of pure poison. The first and most important step towards solving this major problem is to de-link the kitchen and bathing areas from the toilet waste. Consider just the first two for a start. Kitchen and bathing waste typically consist of food residue, grease, dirt and soap as the main impurities. If we were to discharge this effluent from the kitchen and bath into broad-leafed plantations such as banana and papaya, we'd find that these plants are excellent digesters of grease. Using this as a nutrient and this online percolation for onward feeding to local parks and green areas would simultaneously filter and recharge groundwater. The soil, which in reality is nature's giant water filter, would then be fully utilized in place of a small, less effective domestic one. Another traditional method, online percolation, also happens through the presently highly underestimated storm water drains. The balanced water remained within the city area, some absorbing, some evaporating, and raining down again to feed the same city. Instead of understanding the hydrological cycle and learning to exploit it properly, today all waste is sent down the same pipelines to the already overburdened sewage treatment plant, and from there onto the nearest water body. The separation of soil from wastewater would have another benefit because it would ensure efficient production of biogas from the sewage treatment plant, owing to lower water-to-soil ratio, and we'd find that city-wide pipe gas for cooking can finally be more than just a pipe dream. And now, on to our third key issue, the 12-liter cistern.
Why is it that there is this maldistribution of water? Why is it that there are long, thirsty queues in the slum areas and there is this man staying in the elite portion of Delhi enjoying himself in a 400-liter bathtub of water? Is it because water is cheap? I think it is time we talked about having a differential policy of pricing of water.
So I wouldn't say that you go to these streams that cut out swimming pools, cut out this and cut out jacuzzis, and I mean, you can't kill the goose that lays the golden egg. You are charging a phenomenal amount of duty for the man, a phenomenal amount of tax, 40% tax, luxury tax is what you're charging him. He's laying the golden egg. You can't kill that goose. But at our level, if we begin to save water and the other water that is being allowed to run off and flood the Jamuna, etc., if those were conserved and recharging the groundwater reserve on a continuing basis, I don't think we have to worry too much.
For a really dramatic solution to our water supply problems, we need to look elsewhere, beyond the kitchen, beyond the bathing area, to that room which W.H. Auden once called the house where everybody goes. In other words, the toilet. Every use and another 12 liters of precious water supply is literally flushed away for no real reason. And what's worse, this scarce commodity is tragically given a one-way ticket to Agra. Most of today's toilet cisterns continue to be built to specifications that are over 100 years old, when the typical bottom sitting on a toilet was a British one. And as we all know, the British do use toilet paper. In fact, they probably invented the stuff. Mind you, we're not talking about today's soft and silky 6-ply tissue variety either. The British Raj was made of sterner stuff, old newspapers mostly. It was really to send all that stale news down the sewage pipes that one needed the 12 liters. There are new cisterns in the market today which deliver water as and when required in quantities as per the necessity. And while you can't change all the cisterns overnight, you could still solve the problem. Simply put 50% of stones or bottles etc. on the opposite side of the float valve. And what do you get? A 50% cut. That's 6 liters of water used per flushing, saving an equal amount of 6 liters each time. If you multiply on the basic premise of a minimum of 2 usages per person per day in the 8 million strong city of Delhi alone, that's 96 million liters of water saved per day by conservative estimates alone. You would agree that the water problem already looks a lot less formidable, but there is still more that can be done. Precipitation is, in fact, one of the most vital issues of water supply, and it has important connections with land use and land development. These days, the ruling wisdom is to fill up all the vacant areas with concrete to facilitate the parking of cars. As the song goes, we'd even pave paradise to put up a parking lot. The rainwater falling on these concrete areas never gets a chance to enter the soil. The rain in Delhi falls mainly in the drains. The result? The city has hardly any visible topsoil that can retain moisture and keep the hydrological cycle going. Actually, if you think about it, a parking lot is not an extension to the road. It's a modification of the parks or green areas and should be treated as such. Rather than fill it with concrete or macadam, we ought to let the soil breathe here. An effective alternative to the present non-absorptive paved areas is the use of ferrocement jalis or lattice blocks, which allow the users to keep their feet high and dry, while at the same time making it possible for the grass to grow through the gaps, for the soil to absorb and retain rainwater. The jali is simple to lay over compacted earth. It's easy enough to grow the grass in the voids, and even easier to run a lawnmower over it. All you need to do is drive over it and alight without even getting your feet wet. And if you have doubts about whether this perforated steel panel, PSP, can stand the wear and tear of a car park, well, think again. PSP is being used in many parts of the world as landing strips for aircraft. So why not in at least car parks across India? Ferrocement jalis are easily available in large quantities by roadside. You can't poke holes in this idea. They're already there. Simple facts state that there are 22 lakh vehicles in Delhi alone. Now, if you multiply these 22 lakhs by an average of 20 square meters per parking slot, and multiply that further by 3, owing to the fact that every vehicle requires 3 parking slots, one at home, another at the workplace, and a third at the shopping areas, we get a staggering 13,000 hectares of land being used for parking alone, without even taking into account driveways and other non-absorptive paved areas which are just waiting to be used for the furthering of a more efficient water management system. It's amazing to see that at one end, we are engaged in an expensive firefighting exercise to boost our water supply, and at the other end, we're engaged in another firefighting exercise, spending crores of rupees to clean up our rivers and reduce pollution. Two problems seen in isolation, each looking enormous, and yet together, they provide a solution in themselves. जिस जल से प्राणी मात्र का जीवन रहता है, उस जल के आश्रय को बहुत छोटा भी जो पुरुष बनवाता है, वो 60,000 वर्ष संपूर्ण सुख के साथ स्वर्ग लोक में वास करता है. This Hindi translation, taken from its Sanskrit original, dates back to the 15th century and is found in the Vasturaj Vallabha by Mandana Sutradhara, and it highlights the traditional Indian respect for water and the importance of planning around natural water courses. We will deal with this issue at length in a subsequent episode of this series, but for now, suffices to say that if one were to start planning around natural water courses and build a civilization around it, then that civilization would sustain itself and prosper for many centuries to come.
If only we can learn to apply the lessons of the past to the needs of the future, without thinking of our heritage only as a heritage of beauty and culture, we find that our heritage is also of efficiency and utility, and that's what makes it so beautiful. We could again live like kings, well, as far as water is concerned anyway.